Hey everybody, this is Adam. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up before we dive into this episode that we had to record this episode outside, so take it with a grain of salt. You may hear some cars in the background, some leaves rustling. Our guest even had a pet rooster, so you might hear that going off in the background. We did what we could do to scrub that background noise out, but there may be a few spots where there's a little rough audio, so keep that in mind when you're listening. Also, you might hear us swatting at mosquitoes. We probably got bit by more mosquitoes than we ever have before, so if you're watching on the video, you're definitely going to see that, but we hope you guys like this. There's a lot of great information, and we'll dive into it. Enjoy.
You're listening to STAGR Cast, brought to you by STAGR Gear.
All right, so this is episode number 10 of STAGR Cast. This is Adam. Isaac and I are back in New Hampshire today, and we're bringing a guest that's been requested by a lot of guys. He's an old-time buck hunter from New Hampshire, and we're sitting here with Charlie Foote. So thank you for doing this with us, Charlie. We appreciate it.
Well, it's my privilege to be able to talk to you guys here tonight. This is something that us old guys are all getting worn out, and we can pass along a little knowledge to help everybody else along. Glad to do it. You know? So,
is this the first podcast you've ever done?
Yes, it is.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, yeah. So why don't you give us a little bit of a background on yourself, how you get into hunting, what you do, and a little bit from there.
Well, I started hunting when I was 11 years old. My family all hunted, and my mother had like a hunting lodge, and of course all the deer come in there. All the deer hunters come in, you get to see all the deer, and I got introduced to hunting that way, and then I hunted with my father some, and he was just a meat hunter. Of course back then, that you could shoot any deer that you saw, and basically that's what we did. And
you hunted to eat back then, right? Hunted to eat, yeah.
Yeah, and I got interested in tracking, and I got lucky and shot me a decent buck on snow, and that kind of lit the fire. And I've been down here in this area here, where we are. There's 800,000 acres of land that's open to everybody who wants to hunt, and there's a lot of country, not a lot of deer, and it's something you spend. I tell everybody I spend the whole deer season to see one rack buck.
Yep.
And it's one of those things that generally when I see him, I'm trying to shoot him.
So you're not super picky then?
No, you don't. I mean, if you're going to hunt in New Hampshire and you want to shoot a rack buck, you better be pulling trigger if you see something you might like. I mean.
Yep.
When you got snow on the ground, you can track in. You can pick out a bigger buck track to follow, and then sometimes you can look at them long enough so if it's something you don't want,
you can split off.
But you just you can pass on them. But out here the way things are now, you gotta take a shot that's offered. A lot of times it's not the ideal perfect shot, but you can knock him down, and you got snow and blood, you'll have him shortly.
So you would describe yourself as a tracker?
Primarily, yeah. But I mean, down here, a lot of winters we don't have snow, and then, the last 3 years I've taken up scrape hunting, and, I've had really good luck. I had my buck before snow came these last 3 years. So.
Do you know the dates? The dates on your last three you said you got on the scrape?
Well, the first one that I got was in the middle of muzzleloader season here in New Hampshire.
Okay, so early November.
And then the second one I got would have been the first Sunday of rifle season.
Okay, yep.
And then last year the one that I got was 1 hour into the first day of rifle season.
No kidding. So all pretty early.
Yeah,
early in the season.
And then I think the one thing with what I'm seeing about scrapes, there's a lot of young deer that come use these scrapes, and you kind of got to pass up on them, and I think your older bucks will probably come in later. But the other thing too in this country around here, well, like everywhere, there's an awful lot more young bucks than there are old big bucks, and the big bucks are smart enough to stay out of sight where the other ones aren't. So.
Yep. Being that you've been hunting for a while, do you think there's more big bucks around now, or earlier in your career hunting? Was there more then, or?
Buddy,
got the pet rooster kicking around here.
Yeah. I think right now probably it's about maybe there's more now, because I think in the area that I hunt there's more logging going on, and there's more food available for the for the deer to grow better on.
Yep.
So better habitat.
Yeah, it is, and I think maybe we're getting smarter about how to hunt them.
Yeah.
Chicken.
Yeah, he's a nuisance, that guy.
That's what, your neighbor's rooster, right?
Somebody dropped him off here. If you want a rooster, come get him.
That's funny. Okay, yeah. So you would say would you track primarily if you can, but you've taken up still hunting and stand hunting and stuff in recent years when there wasn't as much snow? Would you say, so you describe yourselves as a tracker when there's snow, but in recent years when there's been less snow, you've been taken to stand hunting and hunting scrape lines?
Well, I like to still hunt pretty well, and I've had awful good luck calling and rattling.
Okay.
That buck growl call that I was talking about, I ended up tracking the deer to use that buck growl call, but I was on a scrape. You get these calls and they all tell you about how wonderful it is, and if you're going to call deer, you better get up in a tree so you don't get attacked by them. But I came to a real nice scrape there, and I took this out and I said, well, everybody else been talking about how good it works, and so I blew it 2 or 3 times, and I got a little impatient. I was thinking, this thing's as big a joke as anything, and took 2 steps and there was a buck right there, and he took off. I'd called in a buck, but then I got on his track here. It was first Saturday of rifle season there, and I found his track, and he was a deer that was on testosterone overload. I mean, he was making scrapes and rubbing trees and checking every doe track he could find, and then I came to a spot. He going into the softwood, and there was a little patch of open hardwood where I could see, stopped in that open hardwood, and got out my call and blew it 3 times. Did 2 growls and 2 grunts and a big old growl, and I was tucking that thing in my shirt, and the deer literally charged me.
No kidding.
We brought 8-point deer rack to a gunfight.
Is that the first one you ever had charge you like that?
Well, that's the first one.
First and only one. Yeah, that's pretty rare right there.
Yeah, I had one. When I was rattling there, I had a deer come in somewhat of that, but that situation there, I think with rattling, probably it's probably all the information, but rattling will work. It's up to the hunter to get there's rattling to where a deer can hear it. Once you get to where a buck can hear it, then, and like the best situation that I know of is if you can get around a bunch of doves, or if you can let doves walk by. And that that deer that I was telling you about that rattled in, there was 2 does that come feeding up through there, and I'd rattled twice and nothing happened, and these does came through, and I was looking them all over. Matter of fact, put my scope right up on 7 power and couldn't find a horn on either one of them. And then I let them go by, and then I rattled again, and pretty good shape, but I think the wind had died down a little bit. Well, this buck come charging right down through. I mean, he was all bristled up, he is laid back, all his horns up, and he's over here. I got to turn around, throw my horn, turn around, and of course I'd left my rifle on 7 power. So
oh man!
So when I got a whole rifle full of brown hair, I shot, and that was the end of that. But this is another good thing for rattling. You get in where does have fed the night before, and you take a lot of times these bucks will go downwind to where the deer have all fed just to check and see if there's any does in heat, and there's apt to be scrapes and stuff around there. You go in the morning with a drag and put down a good hot doe scent and climb up in a tree and spread it around. I mean, that's what they're looking for that time of the year. And do some calling, and you can bring them in that way.
And that's worked out for you, the last 3 years you said, right? That type of hunting?
Yeah, I've got 3 bucks the last 3 years. With the with
scrapes.
And another thing I've had good luck with is that big wide 10-pointer there that I got. That one we had, down here where we live is, we're 1,000 feet. Up in the mountains you're at 2,500 feet. Well, down here, it rained, and come daylight in the morning, I looked up there on top of the hill, and there was some snow up there. So, up I go, and there was a ridge up there. And what I like to do, I like to walk these ridges, and you get up in the softwood, and up in there's a lot of places you can see down in the hardwood a long ways. The wind was right, so, I went all the way around the ridge and got to the other side, came back down it. The wind was kind of backwards for me, but I was up enough so I could see out where they couldn't. And there was a spot there where the deer always crossed. I got to that spot figuring there might be a buck track here, and there was 2 moose tracks and a bear. So, so then what I did, I got out my GPS, and there was a spot further over that the bucks had been working there, big time a year ago. So I put on some doe and heat scent and, doctored things up, and I laid me a track down through, and there was a spot where I went through, there was a clear cut there, and there was a patch of softwood both sides of it, and then there was a nice finger of hardwood went down through it, and there was quite a bit of deer activity there. So I walked down through there and went over where the bucks were, and there was, last year, and there was nothing there, which is not unusual for this area.
Yep.
I was coming back up through that spot, and that son of a gun was following my tracks right down through there, just as pretty as could be.
Really?
And what did he weigh?
That one ended up weighing 249 pounds. So.
And that was your heaviest one ever, right?
Yeah.
That's a big deer.
Yeah,
that's
was
a big deer.
buck. It was exactly 2 miles from where he dropped to get him out of the woods.
No kidding.
All by yourself?
Well, my wife, I got to give all the credit to my wife. She puts up with an awful lot of obsessions for me and stuff, but she insists every time I get a buck, I come get her to help me drag it out.
Oh,
so
no
I
kidding.
went and got her, and we dragged it as far as we could and left it. And I had 2 friends that I told about it, and got out the truck, and the truck was parked there, and they'd been tracking us down. I went back to get them to help them, and they headed out to a road there where we didn't load it. I got a deer buggy in the national forest. You can't put an ATV in the forest, so we put it in that deer buggy and brought it out. But that was, that deer was following the doe, and a hot doe scent is what he was following. And,
No kidding.
And you said he was right on a hardwood finger down through some softwoods? He was in an area where there was a...
What there was is actually was a natural funnel there. There was kind of a rocky spot here and another rocky spot there and a bunch of softwood, then this clear finger of hardwood, and that's, just a place where all the animals travel.
Yep.
And he was right there.
No kidding.
And that was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It wasn't,
Yep.
Just cruising through.
He was out looking for a doe.
Yeah. You take early on before they find those. You get on a buck track, it's looking for a doe, especially early. And,
Right.
and I've gone 20 miles and never even bothered him.
Yeah.
Yep. And you said that was 249, correct?
Yeah, that was all
249.
dressed, cleaned right out. And he was the number 1 buck in the state that year, weight-wise.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah. A lot of the guys we talked to had referred to you as the guy that's killed a lot of 200-pounders in New Hampshire. How many 200-pounders have you taken in New Hampshire that were over 200 pounds?
Yeah, I've shot 13 of them that dressed over 200.
13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
and
a big
249 is
number.
the biggest. Wow.
It's a
What's your
great
next
number.
biggest one after the 249?
230.
230. What's the story on that buck?
Well, that was the one that rack's laying right over there. There again, it was what there was here was we had rain down here, and I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and headed up into the high country, and up about 2,500 feet there was about 4 inches of snow. And I drove out this road and found this track. So I said, well, it's about 3 hours before I can get daylight. I went back and got breakfast and got on my wool clothes, my rubber boots, and the weather was so bad that day I took an open-sighted 30-30 rifle with me.
Yep.
And went back up in there, and and I had to take my glasses off. You couldn't keep that working. You couldn't keep a scope rifle working. So when I got back up there, it was about 7:15, daylight enough so you could see pretty good. It turned to rain, and the wind was probably a steady 20 miles an hour, and gusting to 35. And the tracks that were there at 4 o'clock were just dimples in the snow now.
Yep.
So I knew it was a fresh track, and I started in on the track, and I came to where another deer had crossed, and there again it knows, the old big buck, he makes 2 tracks, is what I call, they aren't in line like the small deer are there. It's staggered.
They got STAGR,
And
yeah.
they have to be, a lot longer and wider and stuff, and so I knew which track to take. And what he did then, he went into a place where there was a lot of little beech trees about, shoulder to head high, and they still had their leaves on them. And every time a wind blow, I'd take a couple steps. The wind was constantly, but then it would gust. And when I came to the edge of those little beech trees, I looked over there, and 10 yards away, there's a back leg of a deer and a stomach. But I'm thinking, it can't possibly be a buck. He's that close. And then the buck the deer will do the same thing a horse does. When they're in bad weather, they'll stand with their rump to the wind. Well, that's what he was doing. And then he shook just like a dog does. And when he shook, there was a spruce tree that he was standing behind. I could see the tip of an antler on the tip of his nose, and I could see his hind leg and his belly. So, the only thing I could do was to kind of guess where his shoulder was and pulled up and shot. And when I did, he turned around and ran right at me there. And I got all 7 shots off before.
Jeez.
But he ended up, that deer ended up dressing 2:30, and, good part of it was my buddy didn't want to go hunting with me that morning. They came back 2 hours later and stopped in, come in looking like a drowned rat. Said, "Boy, I could use some coffee." And they were laughing at me. One of them finally said, "You see anything?" And I said, "Yeah, he's laying out in the back of my truck."
No kidding.
Man, that's an unbelievable rack.
But, it's one of those things that I think, what happened that day, that the weather was just so bad that he wasn't traveling.
Yep.
And when I looked, he had just gotten up out of a bed. He was wet. And, all the wind and the noise from those little trees, he never knew what hit him.
Yep.
It was just one of those things that the weather was on my side that day. How often are you going to get within 10 yards of a bucket like that?
Yep.
It doesn't happen unless things are really in your favor.
Yep. Yeah, they refer to those days as the killing days there. It's those days where you get the high winds, or you get the days where that fresh snowfall is falling off the trees, and you really can get in on them those days, it seems like.
Yeah.
Huh.
Do you usually cover a lot of ground, Charlie? Like, when you're out looking for a track, like, you put on a lot of miles?
Yeah, I'm like everybody else. I ride the roads until it gets daylight, and then there's places that I like to go check. And there was one there I shot. Well, it was a young deer, and that one, I'll give the whole story on that one here in just a second. But a couple days before, we'd had snow up high, and I got up high, and there was a hell of a buck track up there, a real nice buck track. And I followed him around the mountain up there, and ended up being that he went down out of the snow, and I couldn't go anymore. So, not being young anymore, I was pretty tired the next day. And there was another spot that I know up here where when the bucks get chasing the does, that they, they'll be in this spot. So I went up in there that day, and there was a lot of chasing tracks going on up there. The situation there, spread out a bunch of doe scent, do some calling, rattling, maybe you can convince somebody else that there's something going on. Well, nothing happened that day. And so I said, well, this is good. I'll go back the next day there and I'll find something. Then we had probably 3 inches of new snow. And I said, well, this new snow, I'm going back up and see if that old big buck was around there. And I headed up the road there toward where he was, and there was a buck track in the road up there. It was snowing pretty good, and there was not a single speck of snow on that track. And I said, man, I'm going right here. So I, loaded up my gun, took off up the ridge, and went up a ridge, and peeked over on the next ridge, and the buck was standing there. So from 18 minutes when I slammed the truck door shut, I was holding his horns.
Jeez.
But the thing of it was, that buck there, he was a 2.5-year-old buck. He dressed 211 pounds, which was a nice buck. But his face was all swollen up, his neck was all swelled up, his front leg was all swelled up. And then, when I skinned the deer out, I found out the rest of the story. He'd just been in a huge fight, and he had got badly beaten. And, that's why, he was standing there with his head down. He was really hurting.
Oh, no, yeah.
But, there again, it's one of those things that happened to be at the right spot at the right time, and took advantage of it. So.
Yeah. Jeez. Would you say that you kill a lot of your deer in like a similar area, or do you kind of have a lot of different spots you go, or do you have one area that's particularly better than other?
There's 2 townships around here that I hunt in that compose, roughly 72,000 acres.
Yep.
And all of those 200 pounders have come out of that same area.
Gotcha.
I try to, if there's beech one year, I'll hunt the beech nuts. If there's some acorns, I can hunt that. And then there's a couple apple orchards there that are getting pretty well grown up now. Those are worth checking out. And then, of course, the new cutting that they do around, you want to stay close to as new a cutting as you can get there, So.
Yeah.
That's a key. The new cuts.
Yeah.
That's where you find a lot of the
bigger
bucks.
Well, things work the best for them.
Yep.
You take like I tell everybody, when there's somebody puts in a new cut in the area, it's like having Walmart drop in your backyard. It's open 24 hours a day, and there's no cashiers. You can get anything you want. You don't have to travel far. The big thing with the deer is survival in the wintertime.
Right.
If they can get in the softwood out of the wind and the snow, and then jump over the fence and climb out into a clear cut there, and everything is sticking up out of the snow. They can eat all they want, and they expend no energy. They put it into growing their body, and it's really great for the deer. So, but
one thing I wanted to ask you was, have you noticed that the biggest bucks will be near the best habitat? It doesn't even matter how far off the road it is, if you get what I'm saying. Like, because I always thought the biggest bucks were going to be the farthest back, like the farthest away from all the roads, and sometimes I'd be going way out in the middle of nowhere, and the big buck would be way back by the road next to a brand new cut. Yeah, have you noticed that the biggest bucks are going to be in the best habitat, and it doesn't matter where it is. It could be next to a bunch of houses.
Well, it could very well be. I mean, they're getting smarter. I mean,
yep.
I tracked one a year ago there, went 150 yards and jumped him right out of somebody's back dooryard.
Yep.
I didn't end up getting that deer, but,
Yep.
I wasn't prepared for that deer to be there, but he'd figured out that nobody bothered him before we had any snow there.
Right,
and,
yeah.
That's
So
where he was. And
the big bucks are smart. They're smart.
they are. That's how they get to be big and old,
That's right, yeah.
That's a good point. What do you do for scouting wise? Do you do a lot of summer scouting or anything like that? Do you do any scouting, or you kind of just go on a whim?
Well, I usually
when the
do my
season comes?
scouting with a gun in my hand.
Okay, gotcha.
No, I mean, the big thing, the summer scouting around here, there's a big transition period from when, they are not the same animal in September as they are in November.
Mm-hmm.
And, they, in this area around here, the acorns drop later on, the beech nuts drop later on. Of course, they're around the food all the time, but the big thing here is to find a deer when you're ready to hunt them. And I mean, you can find them in the summertime. You go there and, they're
gone
5 miles away. So, the best time to scout is when you can shoot them right now.
When there's snow, right?
Yeah, snow. Snow's
Yeah.
a big thing, but another thing is tracks. A lot of deer runs, rubs and scrapes. I love a big old scrape, a big old rub, and there's some places there. These you get into these old signpost rubs where the same thing gets rubbed every year. Around here the favorite tree for them is probably brown ash trees. I can show you some around here that are dead. They've been rubbed on so long, and then they seem to like basswood pretty well. And then hemlock and balsam, and then they rub everything else if they get the mind to.
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha. Huh. I got a question for you. This is actually someone submitted this question. They want to know, what do you think is the biggest thing that you're doing that's allowed you to kill, bigger than average bucks over the years compared to other people? What do you think is your one ingredient that you have
What's
going on?
your secret?
Yeah, what do you think's the
What's my secret?
Yeah, what's
what
your
do you got
secret,
going
Charlie?
on?
Well, I'll tell you the same thing that I tell everybody when we go, when I go hiking a lot.
Okay.
80% psychological, 20% physical. Get your mind in it. Do not get discouraged, and be just as happy to go hunting the last day as you are the first day.
That's some great
You cannot
advice.
spend enough time in the woods, and especially when the rut's going on, or when the bucks start chasing the does all over the place. Man, if you're not in the woods, you're missing a good chance. And I tell everybody, every time you find an excuse to stay home, you're giving a buck a new life.
That's a good way to look at it right there.
That's pretty good.
I mean, you can't kill them sitting on the couch. I mean,
Nope.
you got to be out there in the woods, and short of a major hurricane, I'm out there somewhere kicking around.
Yep. So you're hunting every day you can.
Yeah,
Every
I
day
do.
you can. Yep.
Now I'm getting older. I don't cover the ground that I used to, but you go out there and find like that 18-minute buck. I mean,
Yeah.
how perfect could that get?
Can't beat
and
that.
there's one I was telling you about that took 5 minutes. Just because I'd given up on one buck and was done
Right.
for the day, and found a buck in a doe track right there. It doesn't get any prettier than that. and
Yep.
End up on the old little lump there and give him a call. Man, he's gonna, these old bucks, when they're with a doe that's in heat, she's spreading scent all over the countryside, and all the other bucks, they're gonna key in on it, and they're gonna come in and try to take that doe away from that buck. And I mean, they they cause a big buck a lot of grief, and a lot of times if you can convince that big buck that you're another buck, he's going to come chase you away, and you've got him right in your lap. I mean, if you find a buck in the doe track in the morning, by all rights and means, unless you do something terribly stupid, you'll see that buck before the day's over and get a chance to shoot at him,
Yep.
But
No kidding.
How old are you, Charlie? How old are you?
74.
Not bad. You're killing them still. You're still killing them.
Oh, yeah.
Like nothing.
Yeah. No, this is something that, my wife and I do a lot of hiking. This 4,000 foot mountains here in New Hampshire, and that's where we are. Try to get out there every other day. So
yeah, let's touch on that a little bit. How you hike every other day, you said?
Try to,
every other day.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of your life is hiking and staying active.
Well, this is something that, I retired 11 and a half years ago, and the time I retired, I weighed 235 pounds. And now I weigh 165 pounds. So, I've dumped 70 pounds, and aches and pains have gone away. And, walking in the mountains, it keeps your legs built up. It's the same muscles you're going to use tracking deer. And it's,
good cardio all the time.
Yeah. And then, another thing that my wife really likes to do is bushwhacking.
Yep.
And there's 2 lists in New Hampshire of the what they call the 500 highest mountains, and only about 20% of them have got trails.
Oh, no kidding.
So what you do then, I use a GPS and, map and compass, but it keeps your wood skills tuned right up perfect. I mean, here's the mountain over there, and I put it in the GPS and follow the GPS. I mean, and the GPS will get you there, and you can follow your way back, or you can set up your map and compass and take a compass bearing, and you fight your way up some awful nasty stuff sometimes. But traveling all these places that you see, you find some good buck signs.
I was just gonna ask you, have you ever found a big deer hiking?
Yeah, I found some decent sign and stuff that I've used, and mainly I hunt around this area, a fairly small area. I've seen some wicked sign. Well, there was a place up in just south of Littleton up there. We were climbing up a mountain up there, and I saw the doggonest buck scrape up there I've ever seen. Weren't smart enough to put it in my GPS, but it was on a little oak ridge, and there was a little patch of softwood there, and there was a scrape there that probably was 15 feet in diameter. I mean, I think every buck in the country was there scraping up. That's the craziest scrape I've ever seen.
Yep.
No
You
kidding.
ever killed any bucks off of that area up there?
No, I never hunted them.
Never got back up there? Just the
No,
craziest
it's one
scrape
of
you
those
ever
things
seen?
I got all the hunting I can handle right here,
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And I spent the better part of 60 years of my life roaming around this area, so I can kind of clue in on what might be available, and that's the first place I go check. And it seems to, you spend a lot of time in one spot, you learn a lot about it.
Yep. That's fair. And you got a scorecard to prove that right there, which is pretty impressive. All right, jumping back in here, Charlie, I had a question. So being that you've killed a lot of 200-pound bucks and a lot in the 180s, 190s, 170s, is there any common characteristics that you see between those big bucks, like something that they're all doing? I know every deer is different, but is there something like a major key there or similarity between all those that you're seeing? The big ones.
I think probably what a lot of it is, these probably the biggest bucks that I've shot have been, right toward the end of the season. And I think what's going on with that is that the rut is pretty well wound down, but the big bucks know when the rut's really cranking up, and they come take control of it. And then, when it's winding down, they're still looking big time for more does, and they cover some ground, and like that one right there, that old buck there, I shot him next to the last day of the season. I knew he was in the area because I'd seen his track 2 or 3 times, and so I went looking for him. I crossed 2 smaller tracks, and then I found his track, and I went up behind us. There was a big old ledge up here. He went behind, and down the other side, and there was a major deer on there, and I looked, the major deer on his track had gone down it and come up it, so he saved me an untold amount of time there. I went just a little bit further, and I see him jump up, and he left. And so I went up and looked, and that deer was old and tired. The deer couldn't couldn't even run. He just staggered. And, you know, I had to jump him 4 more times, but eventually he was standing right between 2 little spruce trees, and, you know, that was the end of him. But that was, you know, there again, it was the end of the season. I think, you know, a lot of these old big bucks have been worn down from rutting, and also I think, you know, a lot of them are been in big fights and nursing injuries and stuff, and if you could catch up with a big buck at the end of the season, your chances are a lot better than they are at the beginning. You know, look at that one. You got a bunch of points right here broken off and there and over there.
And what buck was it you said that was beat up that you shot? That one that you were telling us about before?
What'd you say?
What buck was it? Was it this buck right here, the one that was all beat up, you said? That you got?
No, that was a 2.5-year-old buck.
Oh, no kidding.
He probably got tangled up with something like that.
I guess so.
Right?
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, that one they addressed 219.
That's a beauty
next
right
to
there.
the last day of the season.
So that's a big deer.
Yeah.
That's a really
and
big
he was,
deer.
You know, he was pretty well worn down.
So he could have been technically around 250 beginning of the year, right?
Probably was, yeah.
That's a giant buck, man.
That's
Giant
a
buck.
huge New Hampshire buck right there.
That was the last year that the Belknap County Sportsman's Association had their buck pool, and that buck won the buck pool, and I got a brand new 30-06 out of it.
No kidding.
That's awesome.
That's pretty good.
But
So,
you know, that was again the next to the last day, and you know, I got a 10-pointer over there at dress 222. That one I shot the very last minute to last day.
No kidding.
That old buck, I followed him all day. He was with 2 does and never had a chance. Didn't see him. Then there was an apple orchard back up in the mountains that they feed in sometimes, and I got pretty close to that, and I ran around the other side of it, and he was just coming out. But that one dressed 222, and it was, you know, it was the last minute, the last day. Probably 5 minutes later, and it would have been too dark to shoot. But
no kidding.
But you know, there again, I mean, keep your mind in the game.
That's right.
Go right after it.
Yep.
And
So it's that late season pattern that you think you're killing your biggest bucks on. The late season pattern is kind of what you're killing your biggest bucks on, getting them in the late season.
Yeah, the late season. And, you know, I mean, of course, you know, my friend I was telling about, he's a bow hunter and he's an avid deer hunter. And he shot 2 bucks last year, one with his bow, one with his rifle, and they both dressed 239 pounds.
Both of them.
Yeah, and the one he shot with his rifle, he shot the opening day of rifle season. So, you know, he was in the right spot where the deer were feeding well, and, you know, you just got to be where they are. The whole idea is find some big tracks, some big rubs and scrapes, and spend all the time you can there, you know. Good things are going to happen.
Do you have a most memorable tracking story that you can think of? Your best tracking story? You got one? And I'm sure you got a lot of them, but is there one?
Well, I can tell you my best tracking story.
Let's hear it.
You're probably disappointed in it, but a friend of mine wounded a buck. He told me all about what a nice buck it was, and he wounded it, and he had to leave the track. So he told me where it was, and so, you know, I figured, you know, he'd wounded it, and it'd be just the next day, you know, I'll go clean right up, and I'll have that buck here by noon. Well, I went up there and took his track, and away we went. Well, that was probably the smartest old buck I ever tracked there. When I got on his track, I jumped him, and there was a small lake here, and the son of a gun jumped in the lake and swam across the lake.
Wow.
You know, you could see where they broke the ice and stuff.
Yep.
And then, you know, he went a little ways further, you know, and he came into a deer path, you know, a nice deer path. And, you know, I'm watching, you know, and he had a funny gait and he was bleeding, but when I came to that deer path, you know, I was kind of looking at his tracks and I didn't see it. Well, what that son of a gun did was he went down the track, backed up exactly in his own tracks, and just jumped right off to the side. And then the next trip, it was up his sleeve. The son of a gun get into a brook. You know, he ran down the brook, and I had to go quite a ways down the brook, and there was like a tree that was across the brook. It had a little snow on it, and you could see where he dripped the water in it. And there was 3 different times that buck let me walk right by him. You know, he'd crawl in under a little spruce tree, you know, and I'd probably be within 10 yards of him, walk by him, and he'd sneak out and leave behind me there.
No kidding.
But
he knew how to play the game then, huh?
Yeah, he really did. And I mean, you know, that buck there, you know, I tracked him all that day, and I tracked him the next day until noon, and the snow melted, and I didn't get him.
And you had a bullet hole in him too, right? And he had a bullet hole in him, right? You said your friend hit him. He had a bullet hole in him.
Yeah,
that buck?
yeah, he did.
He's still
and, I
doing
mean,
that.
The deal was leaking all day, and it just, that was, that probably was my most memorable story. I mean, that deer there, I was young, he gave me a college education on how to track bucks that day right there. And I mean, every trick he could pull, get into the brook, jump all sideways, crawl in under a tree and let you walk by. And he just, it was
Smart one.
the last day that I tracked him, there was 3 different people took his track, and within 200 yards, he'd lost all 3 of them. I mean, that's just how hard a track it was to follow. I mean, you never walked in his track, and you almost had to go track to track. And, that was a buck there that probably if there had been 2 people working on that track, well, somebody could have been watching instead of having to watch the track so much all the time that, you might have seen that deer. But that, for my information, was the best tracking story I've got. I didn't get the deer, but boy did I learn a lot.
Yeah, that taught you a lot for your future track jobs for sure then.
Yeah.
What's the farthest you think you've ever tracked a buck before?
Probably that one I got the last minute the last day. I figured that one there probably was 18 to 20 miles. I mean, he just kept going all day, he and his 2 girlfriends, and then I've had them at, I've had them, take them in the morning, shoot them later on in the afternoon, and, like I said, the shortest one was 5 minutes and 18 minutes, and then,
20 miles, that's a long way.
Most of the time, you can get them in, you have to get them when you can see them there, but, the conditions, there was one I shot here not too awful long ago that we had a new snow one day, and it was great. And then it warmed up and rained, and the next morning it was, tracking deer in the slush, and the stuff was dripping off the trees all day. It was hard to track him because there were slush tracks all over the deer tracks, but it ended up being that, we get all the softwood and up on the hardwood ridge, and it peeked up over and on, he was laying right there in his bed just as pretty as could be. But, the only reason that it worked, it was so much noise from things falling off of trees that day that, it was perfect. It covered your scent and covered your sounds, and that was the end of him.
Yep.
What's the story on that 5-minute buck?
Well, the 5-minute buck was what there was here was a swamp, and there's a road halfway around it that you can drive on, and then the other halfway is a logging road. So I went up there, that was the year we had, the snow was about 6 inches deep here. It was a rainy, foggy morning. I went up the road there, and there was one small buck across the road. I went up a little further, another one crossed the road, and I parked my truck. And down in there was another smaller buck that crossed the road. And I said, man, there's a lot of deer in here. And they went halfway around and found the track. It probably was a 180-pound buck. And I said, well, that's good enough for me. And took after that one. And 10:30 in the morning, the fog lifted, and I was looking at that buck, was looking at each other, but, my gun was here and stood up here, and he took off, and I didn't get I shot at him, scared him, tried to scare him to death, but it didn't work. So he went up the hill, and there was a ridge up there, and up on top of the ridge was, I jumped him again, but it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so, I had a long ways to go. So what I like to do up in there is there's a softwood ridge where the hardwood comes up against it. And I've had awful good luck. You walk down that ridge and you look for a fresh track. And a lot of times these bucks, when stormy weather like this, will get up and feed a little bit. And if you find a track, you're bedded right there. And what's even better, see one coming off the ridge. But the next best thing is to find a track coming off where they're feeding. The old deer is busy stuffing his belly and not paying attention behind him, and he can sneak right up on him and shoot him. Well, it ended up being I went down the ridge and didn't find any tracks. So got down a little low, and there was a couple fawns down there, and I didn't want them. Down a little further, there was a place where the road forked. You go to the right, and there was a road out there that was plowed. Of course, by then my legs were really tired. And I said, and then there's the one that I was on, wasn't plowed, but it was bring me out a half a mile closer to Holmes, and it was all downhill. So I go down there a little further, and there was a, like I said, it was a, rainy, snowy, foggy day, and there was a buck track and a doe track down there, and I mean they were smoking hot fresh. And I said, well, the only thing I can do is there was a little knoll right there, and I just hopped up on the knoll and got out my old call there, and you take a lot of time when there's a buck with a doe and heat, there's other bucks around pestering him. If you can convince him that you're a competitor, he's going to come back and chase you off. Well, I get up and did my calling and looked down the ridge there a little ways, and there was a spruce tree there, and there was a back end of a deer sticking out, and I got looking through my scope, and in the spruce tree I could see an ear and see an eye and see the nose, the white around his nose, and see an antler base. So I said, well, there's my buck there. So I just kind of drifted down his shoulder, and I could see the back end. I could see his nose about halfway down, and halfway back is about where it should be. And I shot me a spruce tree, and now the buck came there. So, but I had him hit pretty good, and and that's another thing too. Most people talk about letting a deer lay after you hit it and all this stuff. Well, I don't. You hit a buck, and it's just like running over him with a truck. It's going to take a while for things to start working right. So
that's right.
I ran right after him and jumped him out of a bed right there. He didn't go 100 yards and bedded, and shot at him again and missed. He went and made another bed. And that was just a classic. It was right on a little bit of a knoll, and that old buck, one jump either way and he's gone. Well, I didn't see him that time. Well, if he's bedding down that quick, and I mean, he was bleeding all the time pretty good, a lot. And next time I caught him in his bed, and, that was the end of him. But, that deer ended up dressing 222 pounds, and like I said, it took, from the time I saw his track till I was shooting at him, was just 5 minutes. It was just a matter of being in the right place at the right time, and then, there's the information right there in the snow. All you got to do is be smart enough to say, yeah, I can do something with this buck and take advantage of it, It's using your mind there. Use the 80% here to talk about there,
Yep.
So,
Yep. It's all mental.
Yeah, a lot of it is. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, tracking in general, it's a big mental game.
I think it is, yeah.
Do you think that you're such a hiker? Do you think that helps with the mental thing when it comes to deer season?
Yeah, it probably does. Yeah. I mean, this is something hiking all the time. It helps keep you in shape, and I live the deer hunt. I'm sure both of you guys do too. I mean, that's my thing. It's what keeps me awake. Probably think about it every day.
Yep.
My wife tells me I'm obsessed, and I agree with her.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
That's right.
Nothing wrong with that. I kind of want to switch gears here a little bit. For someone that wants to get into hunting the White Mountains and big woods and stuff like you do and like we do, what would be your tip for them if they wanted to be successful in hunting these big woods? What would you suggest to them?
Get a real good GPS and get well acquainted with it.
Okay.
No, I mean, you got to cover a lot of ground, and if you're worried about getting lost, you're not paying attention. And they make a lot of good maps of these areas. The National Forest puts them out with, I'm sure you folks with the cell phones today, you can get anything you want on the cell phones, and
Yep.
And but the whole idea, you got to cover some ground. You got to find a deer. In this area here, the deer are scattered around in pockets, and if you're not where they are, you're going to waste a lot of time.
Yeah.
The whole idea, I use my GPS religiously, and I've got a lot of years of information in that GPS, and I want to look something up and go there, well, bang, and I'm off. I'm not wasting a lot of time traveling in country where I don't want to be.
Right.
So you say focus on finding that productive country, putting time in, and then kind of boiling it all down from there.
Yeah.
That would be what you
You want to spend the most amount of time that you can in the best sign that you can find.
That's a good point.
Be it still hunting, be it hunting on snow, calling and rattling. You get. I love to lay down a doe and heat trail and still hunt my way through, and if I find something I like, then I make a fish hook back around and do some calling and rattling. It's a great thing to have a buck sneak up behind you,
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't get any better than that.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting how you said there, as I don't think a lot of guys are doing that. They're dragging through an area.
Yeah.
So you're dragging through an area that's got a lot of sign, and you're just kind of doing loops back and forth.
What I try to do, is an area where it's got good sign or something, and lay it. I don't start at the truck, because a lot of times you're laying a scent backwards, so a buck will be going to your truck while you're going the other way there. But,
Yep.
But freshen up once in a while to come into an area where I think there might be some deer, and I put down a scent trail, and I'm not one who only goes 100 yards an hour. I cover a little more ground than that. I'll peek up over my nose and look around and stuff, but you lay a scent trail, and then if the wind is what you want to do. You want to get downwind of your scent trail and just get out of the way a little bit so the buck will end up walking by you. And then, you know, you can get a look at him, and, you know, you use your own eyes and sights, and maybe you come into the spot and you'll see a deer, but, you know, everything that you can do to help yourself up in here where the deer density is so low, the better it is for you. You know, rattling and calling. I tell everybody I do a lot of rattling to have it work once a year, and it usually does. I mean, last year I rattled in a buck that I out of range from a muzzleloader, but I was sitting on a scrape. I hadn't seen anything on the scrape, and get out my horns and rattled, and I did my doggone just to scare him to death, but it didn't work.
Do you use real antlers or do you use fake antlers?
What'd you say?
To rattle, do you use real antlers?
Yeah, I use real antlers.
You do?
I've got 2 left-handed antlers that I use.
Oh, okay.
And what I can do is they ride right under my jacket, right on my left shoulder.
Oh,
You know, I can throw up my rifle and shoot. If I want to rattle, I just get them out and rattle and stick them back in there again. And, you know, I use the doe can call and the buck growl call and the grunt call. And make all kinds of deer sounds out there.
Yeah.
The more you can sound like a deer, the better it is. But
Yep.
Do you look for sheds much?
I haven't as much as I used to, but, you know, I used to spend quite a bit of time looking for shed. Yeah,
You did,
I mean,
yeah.
you're in an area where there's a decent buck. If you find a shed, you know he's made it. So
That's right, yeah.
he's there for next year, unless, you know, we have a, you know, I've found them after the season 2 or 3 times and be all excited about it. But, you know, you take a rough winter around here, and these big bucks are in terrible shape, you know, when it's over. And I guess in all reality, I want to kind of say that I think maybe that's Mother Nature's way of keeping the gene pool turned over. I mean, the buck is an expendable thing. He's strongest, biggest buck one year, and he spreads his genes all around. And then if he dies through the winter, then the next buck comes along, and it's a different set of genes, and it keeps the gene pool turned over and keeps that deer healthy. You know,
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
That's just something. I was in Yellowstone out there talking with a ranger out there, and the elk were in there right out there. And of course, they herd up a harem out there, you know, and they do their thing. But they said out there that these old big herd bulls, you know, the most premium bull in the area, he gets so worn down that by the end of the rut that the wolves end up killing them.
Gotcha.
You know, it's the same thing. It keeps the gene pool turned over, and I think it's a lot of the same thing that happens here with our big bucks. You know, they're in terrible shape when the winter comes, and, you know, they could be banged up bad, and if they can't walk around enough to eat, they're going to starve to death. So,
That's right.
Yep. And there's not a lot of feed up in these hills if there ain't much cutting. So
I mean, they're an
makes
expendable thing. I mean, the only thing they do in the deer pool is contribute genes. Those do the rest of it, you know. So they're in love with a one-night stand.
Yep. That's right.
that's a good way to put it.
I think it's incredible the amount of bucks that you've killed over your lifetime. It's very impressive. I think your hiking has a lot to do with your success. You know, the amount of ground you can cover and stuff. I think it's really interesting.
I think it's
really interesting.
As you get older, you know, keep walking. There's 3 different guys that I hike with.
Yeah.
They take my admiration. 2 of them are 81 years old, and one of them is 79 years old.
Wow.
The guy that's 79 years old climbed Moose Lock every month since he was 50. It's going to be 340 times. He's never missed a month, and he's had both hips replaced.
Wow.
And you take these 4,000-foot mountains around here, there's 48 of them, and he's got 1 hike left, and he will have climbed all 48 of them from all 4 points of the compass. Never mind trails, just go right up over these mountains. And then these, he's got 1 hike left, and he will have finished what they call a grid over 75, and the grid is to climb all 48 mountains in all 12 months of the year.
Wow.
And then there was 2 other guys that are 81, and they both have finished the grid over 75.
No kidding.
I mean, they're incredible. They're out there, these guys are 81 years old, and I'm having trouble keeping up with them, So.
No kidding.
But I think the whole idea is, that they don't stop. They just keep going,
Right. Yeah. It's mindset, right?
Yeah. Well, mindset, and I think it keeps the body limbered up. And you see these old guys they're my age that aren't walking around much, and they're walking with a cane, and they're probably carrying 50 pounds more than they should be. And
right.
you know, it's all about trying to stay in shape. So
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, you can't do what we like to do if you aren't taking care of your legs and taking care of your body.
That's right.
So you're heavily involved with New Hampshire Antler Skull and Trophy Club, right?
Yeah.
Are you one of the founders of that?
Well, I was one of the first scorers that they had there. There was Brian Ellison and Roscoe and myself and a bunch of other people. You know, I've been pretty much scoring since it started. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've seen a lot of impressive deer over
I
the
do.
years in New Hampshire.
Yeah. There's been a lot of deer sitting on the kitchen table in there over there.
I bet. What's the biggest one you scored at for New Hampshire?
I was just trying to think. I think the biggest one that I've scored was like 165.
165.
Roscoe gets all the big ones down there.
Yeah, he was telling
He's
us
a
about
Boone
that.
and Crockett guy there. So
Now, do you know the guy who shot the one? I think it was in this area. I don't know the guy's name. John Moulton was talking about it some. The guy is sitting behind the deer, and it's got these big palmated antlers. And it looks like it's from maybe the early 80s or 70s. And I think it was in this area somewhere. It looked like 160, 70-inch deer, but it had big palmated, like moose antlers.
okay, that was probably my friend John Green.
John Green.
Yeah.
So, do you know much about that deer or how he got it?
Yeah, I can tell you all about that one.
I would love
John
to
was
hear.
a dedicated stand hunter,
Yep.
and he built the stand, and he went in there and set that stand, you know, religiously until that deer came through. And I think what it ended up being, the day that he ended up getting it, the deer had him figured out that you know, it was safe to leave after, you're safe to come out after John left. So John
Gotcha.
went in one afternoon, climbed up in his stand, brought his sleeping bag with him, and he slept in the stand overnight.
Wow.
And then, you know, the deer figured he wasn't there, and, you know, sometime during the next day, the deer showed up and John got it. But
That was an incredible buck.
yeah, that was a heck of a buck.
Heck
yeah.
of a buck. Big palmated antlers. Was
Yeah,
that one over?
yeah.
Was that one over 200?
Yeah, I think that one was 218 or something like that.
So he knew that big buck was there.
Yeah, I mean, he you know, he saw his tracks, and you
Gotcha.
know, he's been you know, he figured out that the bucket figured out it was safe to safe to come out after John left. Well, John fooled him, you know.
Yep.
He went in, and the buck didn't know he was in there, and he figured that he hadn't come in that morning, it was safe to come out. So he,
Yep.
That's some dedication that
Yeah,
you don't
yeah,
hear
yeah.
that. That's,
I mean,
that's
sometimes
incredible.
it takes extra effort, right?
You know,
Jeez.
climb right up in the tree stand. He said he brought a case for his rifle, so he left the rifle down on the ground so he wasn't, you know, breaking the law or anything. Roll up in his sleeping bag, and he said it was a cold, windy night, and the trees were shaking pretty good. But he said, come daylight in the morning, he dragged his gun up, and later the buck showed up. So,
What a story.
Yeah, maybe we should put a picture of John Green's buck on Instagram.
Yeah, we should. I think John Moulton has a picture he showed us.
Yeah, we'll get it from him and put it up. Do you have a lot of photos of the deer that you've killed?
I don't have, no. I've been through a divorce here, and, you know, this is something some of them got left behind. And
Gotcha.
But I got the horns.
Yeah. It's because I was wondering. I'd never seen a lot of photos of you with your racks or with your bucks. I mean, but
Yeah. No, I've got one in there. There was 1993. I had an accident in the woods and lost my left eye. You know, this one here.
Oh, really?
Had to, you know, I had to have a bunch of surgery done, and they got some of it back. But, you know, that year I sat in a tree stand that year, and, you know, I shot a buck here that dressed. I think that one was 206, and it was 2-hour walk back in there. But, you know, when your eyes are screwed up, your depth perception's off. And I tried to track a little bit, but I was doing pretty good if you could see uphill. But, you know, you get downhill, and, you know if you're stepping down 6 inches or 4 feet.
Right.
So I had sat in tree stand that year and got that one. But,
Okay. What kind of an accident? Was it a car accident?
well,
or-
no, I was logging.
Oh, okay.
okay.
Sitting in the seat of my skidder, the safest place you could be.
Yeah.
And I was moving ahead, and I was pulling a bunch of logs up behind it, and I was looking like this. And what happened, there was a post over here, and there was a branch. This post pushed the branch out, and then when it cleared, that snapped back, whoops, and hit me right in the left eye and split my cornea in half. So,
Wow.
but it's one of those things that
least
it ended my logging career. So.
Yeah. At least it wasn't your shooting eye, right? I said at least it wasn't your shooting eye.
Yeah, that was a good thing. It was my left eye, not my right eye there. Yeah, so that's that was a good thing about it. That fall, I told everybody I had to wear a patch because, they took the cornea out, and if you didn't keep that eye patched, things got all screwy there. So I told everybody that year I didn't have to close my eye; I just had to patch.
Just pull up and shoot.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Quick break, then we'll dive right back into the show with Charlie Foote. For those of you that aren't following us on social media and those that are not on our email list, you may not have seen that STAGR Gear pre-orders have opened. So you can go to www.staggergear.com. You can pre-order your gloves, your jacket, your hats, you name it. And if you use the code STAGRCAST, all one word, you can get 10% off your first order. So go to www.staggergear.com, get some gear picked out, and be prepped for the season.
Well, buy a Remington rifle at the Toyota Tacoma truck. Yeah,
That's
so.
right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So are you running a 7600 pump gun?
No, I run a 7400 automatic.
Oh, you're an automatic guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
A lot of people swear at them, but what I do with mine, the whole secret is to keep it from freezing up. And what I do, out along the forearm there's a gap between the barrel and the forearm.
Mm-hmm.
So before the season starts, I oil the spring all up and everything, so it's nice and loose. And then I tape that crack right up so nothing gets in it.
Okay.
And that overgun's been good to me. And I think the main reason I do it, I've had a couple different occasions where I made a shot and didn't, two different times. A deer was standing behind the stump and I shot the stump.
No kidding.
Well, deer jumped out, was trying to figure out what was going on. Well, if you got a worky action, that deer's going to know where you are. But with the automatic, the next thing he hears is the next round coming after him.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just, when you're dealing with shots in a matter of seconds, the faster you can get the shot there, and you take care of that gun, keep it taped up, keep it oiled up, and keep the chamber clean, and I've had pretty good luck with them. I mean, there's a lot of guys that swear at them, but I swear by them. So it's
Yep. Yeah, it seems like some guys really don't like them, and then the guys that have them, that use them, really love them.
yeah.
But just taking care of those 7400s is the biggest thing.
Yeah, you got to keep the springs oiled up, and the big thing is keep the chamber, the bullet chamber clean, so that they claim that there can be a buildup of residue or something in there, but every couple of days get in there with a brush and brush it all out. And, that second shot's pretty handy sometimes.
Yeah, that's real quick.
Yeah.
That's a real quick gun for sure.
Yeah.
Huh. And you running 30-06 out of that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
Yep.
When I bought that one, I used to use a 308. I had good luck with a 308 and a 742.
Mm-hmm.
But when I bought this one, they only made it in a 30-06. So it's about 30-06. I mean, most of the shooting around here, if you shoot 100 yards, you're shooting a long ways.
Right.
Yeah.
In these woods here, most of the time it's 50 yards or less. And
Yep.
So you're using a scope now?
yeah.
You are, yeah.
Yeah, I got a Leopold 2-7 on it, but I got see-through sights set up on it, so
okay.
I keep a peep sight underneath it. So
there you
if
go.
you're in an area and you get a dump of snow on it and the buck jumps up, well, if your scope is screwed up, you just drop down and use the open sights on him there. So
Yep.
Yeah. I had another question that someone submitted for us. They wanted to know what you think is the best recipe for making a 200-pound buck. Is it the habitat? Is it less hunting pressure? What do you think makes the most 200-pound bucks in
I
these
think,
big mountains?
like I was talking about before, it takes good feed to get them to weigh 200 pounds. And, this area here, I think the best thing for them is a lot of logging activity.
Okay.
They got to get the sunlight gets on the ground and everything starts growing. And you take these clear cuts. In the summertime there everything is green. Everything they could want is right there. And then there's the plants all bud up and stuff. In the wintertime, all that browse is right there. And I mean, all they got to do is walk out there in the wintertime and eat to their heart's content, get back into the softwood, and it really is good for them. This past 3 years we've had some wicked oak crops, but I think the oak and the beech nuts is a great big plus for these deer. But I think the biggest thing is hunt around some logging area, and it tends to bulk them up. Like that one there that was 249, that was a 4.5-year-old deer. A lot of them struggle to weigh 200 pounds at 4.5 years old, and he had them by 50 pounds. You take a 2.5-year-old deer that dresses 211 pounds, most of the time your 2.5-year-old deer are 140, 150 pounds. So, the habitat, feed them well and they grow big and fat, just like Vermont women.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't be so.
No, that's funny. That's the good stuff right there.
That is funny, yeah.
It's like my ex-wife.
Oh, there you go.
You're going to open a can of worms with that one, Charlie. That's awesome. So it's just that logging feed is the biggest differentiator.
Yeah, they got to, a deer, like the deer out west, they grow huge antlers and all that. But, they're living in farm country. The soil is fertilized. They plant them all kinds of corn and soybeans. And over on the Connecticut River Valley, you got the same thing over there. They shoot some huge deer over there. But, they're a product of the dirt that they grow up on. Mm-hmm. The better the soil, the better, the better they are.
Yep. That's interesting.
In genetics, too, I think. Have you noticed that, like, some areas just will produce, like, even if you boil it down smaller, like some ridges will just produce 200 pounds?
Yeah, I've noticed that. There's a spot, I logged there several years. The trees out there are the best trees in the whole area. They grow the fastest and have the best quality and all that. And that area there has produced some of the best horns for me.
Oh, there you go.
There again, it's a good soil, good habitat.
Good genetics and all that.
Yeah. And then, we've been logging in there a lot.
Makes sense.
So you're a believer in the soil argument? Good soil? Because we've had some guys say soil doesn't matter. It comes down to genetics and stuff, and other people that...
Well, I think, another thing, too, is, give them good feed and then give them a chance to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So less sun pressure.
Yep.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, and you're going to get that age when you're up in these big mountains and stuff like that.
Yeah. Back in there, they don't get the hunting pressure. There was one place that I hunted. There was a hurricane came through and washed out the roads, and it was like 4 years that nobody could hunt in there. And I'm sure there's some scary deer in there. You can get in there and find them. Good logging, and nobody bothered them. And
some big
other
old
thing
bucks.
too, that the moose, the moose dying down like they have, that's helped the deer out, because you take a moose eat 60 pounds of browse a day and a deer only eats 6. So, a moose eating 10 deers worth every day there,
That's a good point. I didn't think about it like that. You hear a lot of the moose arguments calling for moose to come back and stuff, which is, I think they should come back and stuff, but it's the first time I've heard that the moose, making an impact on the deer like that.
Yeah.
So you think the moose are declining in this area?
Oh, they're definitely declining.
They have.
You used to find moose horns a lot. Now you're finding skulls and bones.
Really?
When we were doing our bushwhack hikes, you used to find a lot of horns, but now it's just mainly bones and.
No kidding.
Yep.
Yeah, in Vermont, it seems like we're getting more and more.
Yeah.
Is what I've noticed in the big national forest pieces. I don't know. It's something about it. It's like in Maine and New Hampshire, they're declining, and in Vermont and the Adirondacks, I've heard of guys in the Adirondacks saying they're seeing a lot too. So maybe there's
just something I've noticed a lot. Hiking, we hike a lot in the wintertime. You find, moose tracks in the wintertime. If you find a bed, these ticks, they look like a peanut M&M.
Yep.
And they're just full of blood. And the moose lays down and there's blood in all
Squished
kinds of
all
beds.
over.
They walk by a tree and they knock them off, and the things are laying in the snow. And I feel bad for the moose. They just get eaten alive.
So how do you think you fix that? Do you shoot more moose to try to maybe get the population down low enough to where the ticks might thin out, and then that's what the Fish and Game departments are trying to do, is get the numbers down so there isn't the host for the ticks. But
it's another thing too. It might be what's known as a natural correction.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot of them, and then they're going to go back down and they'll level out, and maybe they'll come back up again or something. Mother Nature has a ways of doing things.
Everything's on a cycle, right?
Because this is something that the moose population, was low for a lot of years, and then the spruce budworm came through and killed a lot of the spruce trees. So all that new growth came, and the moose all grew with it. And, now it's going the other way for a while. But
yep.
I've never heard of that spruce budworm. What was that? That killed.
Well, it was a thing, especially up north. It came through probably 40 years ago or whatever, and it killed most of the spruce and fir trees up there.
No kidding.
They either killed them or they went through and cut them before they got killed. And see, that started all a new growth, and of course, all the new growth, everything grows new with it. So,
No kidding.
and then the moose hadn't been in this area for a long time, and there was a lot of empty habitat for them, and they all came along and filled it, and then they got to the point where the bubble burst, and then they go down there. But the tick is something that wasn't that many years ago. We didn't have any ticks here at all.
Yep.
Isn't that something how they come?
Yeah, now they're all over the place. So.
Yeah. I remember growing up there was no ticks. I never had any ticks when I was growing up. You down there where you are?
I think we've always kind of had ticks.
Have you?
Yeah,
Up
in
my
my
way there.
lifetime we have.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much when I was real little, but I remember always pulling them
You
out.
guys are young enough, so you've probably dealt with them most of your life.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
something that-
I've always had them. I've had
well,
Lyme
around
disease.
here, probably, they say 20 years or probably 30 years. I don't know. It was a long time we didn't have them. It was, I was amazed when I saw the first tick here in New Hampshire.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you gotten Lyme disease?
No.
I got it.
Yeah, no, there was, years ago there when I was working working for my last employer there, I was doing a lot of timber cruising and stuff, and they came out with a vaccination for Lyme disease. So, he said, well, I'll go, get you the shot. So we got one shot, and a month later we got the second one. And then a year later, we were supposed to get the third one, and we went back a year later, and they said, no, they aren't doing it anymore. What they didn't tell us was that these shots were giving people Lyme disease.
Oh man.
So, but we hike a lot. We have to be pretty vigilant on making sure that we don't have ticks, or if you got one biting, you get. And then, there is a pill now. If you're even suspicious of getting a tick bite, go to the doctor. And I've taken it a couple times there. I mean, you get these pills, and you take 2 of them, and things go right away pretty quick.
Doxycycline.
Yeah. I've used them a couple, 3 times there. There was one time I was hunting in November, and took a bath at night, and there was a tick in my armpit, and all of a sudden the next day my arm was sore, and we went to the doctor, and they gave us those pills, and within 4 or 5 hours I was back to normal again.
Yep.
I don't know if it was Lyme disease or what it was, but I didn't want to take a chance and find out.
Right?
Yeah.
It can be nasty. I've heard.
Yeah.
I just had a fever for I think 4 days, and then they put me on doxycycline for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They had me on it, and then supposedly I'll have it for life, but.
Well, there was a guy there.
I feel all right.
One of the jobs that I had recently was checking logging jobs for King Forest Industry down there, and there was a logger I talked with, and he had Lyme disease to the point where he was like this all the time.
Oh, man.
He was on medication that cost him, I think he said $1,400 a month. He'd been on it for a year, and it was, he was getting better, but, it attacked his central nervous system.
Right. Yeah, see, I think it's if you catch it early enough, if you get the pill early enough, it won't get you as bad as if it runs long, because what happened to me is I had the big bullseye on my back.
Yeah.
So that's how I knew I had it. I think a lot of people, when they get it, they don't even get that bullseye.
Yeah.
So then they just go on and
Mm-hmm.
it gets worse and worse and worse.
Well, and I guess there's some new stuff that they're carrying too that it makes you really sick. I had a couple friends there were that had some type of tick-borne disease. If you're suspicious, man, get to the doctor and get the thing straightened out there. So
there's a disease now coming from ticks that make it so you can't eat red meat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, out west, right?
Well, I think it's south.
Is it south?
I think it's south. It's working its way up
Isn't
north.
That crazy how?
I think actually Pennsylvania they've already found it.
Really?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you get it, I'm pretty sure you can't eat red meat.
Your body
It rejects. Rejects red meat.
Oh yeah. Wow, that wouldn't be good.
Not for us.
Crazy?
No.
Yeah.
No more venison. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, that would be terrible.
That would be terrible. You're eating a lot of chicken.
Yeah.
A lot of chicken.
Yeah. Eat a lot of fish.
Yeah. I got a question for you, Charlie. Being that we're talking about cycles and nature and stuff, and that you've scored a lot of bucks in New Hampshire over the years.
Yeah.
When would you say, or is there any times in New Hampshire when you would say, like, this was the best few years that I've saw?
Heyday.
Yeah, like the heyday, because I know Roscoe said he believes like the last 3 years.
Yeah.
He said was, like, right now you're living in New Hampshire's golden age. Is there times where you can look back over the years where it's gone in cycles, where it's been really good, not so good, been really good? I know winter winters have a lot to impact on that. But
Yeah.
what do you think on that?
I don't know. It's kind of hard to think. You know, it seems like every year people end up here with the best bucks.
Yeah.
You know, there again, I think probably some of the best bucks that I see come out of the, out of the Connecticut River Valley over there, for the simple reason there's excellent agriculture over there.
Gotcha.
And, we get some big woods bucks around here. And there was I think, you stop and think about it, I think the best bucket I ever scored, we were talking about it before, was a non-typical that came off mountain. And that one scored, I think, 212, something like that.
Wow.
My buddy just showed me a picture of that the other day.
Yeah.
He did. He had big drop tines.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just showed that's funny. Yeah.
I think the most unusual one I ever scored, I scored the best rack doe that's ever been scored in the state.
No kidding.
The guy down the Lyme shot that one too. It was, it had a pretty decent rack for,
Yep. Yeah, so would you say, like, right in the last few years, New Hampshire has been the best few years for bucks? Or is there any time?
Probably it's getting, like the last 3 years we've had wicked acorn crops and we haven't had bad winters, and, it gives the deer a chance to develop. And, guys like me lay off a trigger.
You don't discriminate. If you see that you shoot the first good rack buck, you kind of
usually do, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, this is something that, I've gone a lot of years when I didn't even see a deer here. So, there's one in there I shot last year that, that one probably should have been passed up. But, it was a 2.5-year-old deer, had an 18-inch wide rack, and, head tines, I think they were 9 and 7 inches. And
it's a great buck.
Yeah.
It's a great buck for these.
The main beams are, I think, 22, 23 inches, but he had no mass. That was a big
just a
thing.
young deer.
But
Good
give
genetics.
him a couple of years and he'd have really been outstanding. But he looked awful good in the scope open in the morning.
Yeah,
I bet. Yeah,
you can't let them go around here.
Yeah, I don't see. I didn't get a chance to look him over a lot. I saw a right main beam, and the other one was there, and man, that's good enough for me.
Yep. And you're happy as a clam with that.
Yeah. No, it was...
Good.
Charlie, did you ever have a big one that got away on you, like a one that stands out?
Yeah.
You do?
Well, there was one I hunted, I was telling you about a pair of sheds that we found.
Yep.
And I hunted that deer for a couple of years, and, I never filled a tag either one of those years. But, that was a deer I think probably would have made 170.
Wow.
He was...
Scoring-wise.
But, it's one of those things that, you can't kill a big one if you shoot the first one that comes along. And I kind of decided to try to get that big one. I didn't, but, that's... But generally, the first time I see a deer is when he's in my scope. That's, around here, there, like I said, I don't use game cameras. I don't own one, but, I depend on snow to find my deer. And, and they move around so much here that, they can be here on this side of the mountain a couple of days, and then, 2 days later they'll be on the other side of the mountain there. The place where I do my scrape hunting there, they've moved back and forth across the mountain there. It's, probably 7 or 8 miles, and, they'll be one place or the other or on a different mountain. They don't live in their 1 square mile like it's supposed to around here,
It's not like farmland deer where they're living in a bedding area and then they're coming out to feed, They got a big range in these mountains for sure.
You take a year when there's a lot of feed, like last year, they didn't have to be anywhere they didn't want to be. Anytime they wanted to eat, they just stop and,
look around
and beech nuts and, good browse, and, they aren't connected to a single cornfield or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. All right, we'll kind of start wrapping this up, but I kind of wanted to talk to you about some of the deer you shot. So you said you shot 13 over 200 pounds, right?
Yep.
Do you have any idea on how many deer you've killed total in New Hampshire? Rough estimate, you think?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, when I was younger, I was hard on does.
I bet you gotta eat.
But I mean, it was legal back then, and then I went through a spell where if I see a deer with horns on it, if he was looking in the other end of my gun barrel, I could miss him just as well. It's because I had wicked buck fever for a few years. Yeah, but, right now I've got 29 racks in my house here, so it's, there's some of the small ones I didn't keep when I was younger, but, like I said, I've had my share of the years where I didn't get a deer. But,
Right. But, and you're gonna have that when you're hunting these woods for sure.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, this country around here, it doesn't, you know, you earn them around here.
You do. Yep.
I got one last question for you, Charlie.
Sure.
If you could tell your 25-year-old self some hunting advice, what would it be? If you could tell your 25-year-old self some hunting advice, what would it be?
Well, probably when I was younger, I didn't spend enough time in the woods. You know, get out there, get in the woods.
Yep.
And, you know, like I said now, when I was 25, we didn't know anything about, didn't have tree stands, didn't know anything about the rut, didn't know, you know, the information that everybody's got today is phenomenal. I mean, you can go out in the woods and look around a little bit and say, yeah, this is pre-rut, or this is the chase phase, or this is the rut, or this is post-rut.
Yep.
You know, and each one of those you hunt differently, you know. I mean, it's just, you know, if I was 25 today, know what I know now, man.
They'd be in trouble, huh?
Yeah.
But, you know, the whole idea, I've learned a lot on tracking. I mean, you know, like I tell everybody, well, they want to go tracking, they want to shoot a good buck. How do you do it? And I said, probably the only way to get good at tracking is to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, you're gonna get made a fool of a lot, but every so often you'll get a look at him. I tell people that if I can have 3 good days on snow, usually I'll see the deer.
Yep.
Another thing I've learned, in this area here, we've got a lot of hardwood, and if you're tracking a deer in this area here, and you see a spruce tree in the middle of hardwood, Mister, pay attention, because more times than not, they're bedded. I don't know how come they seem to want to
It
bed
is
under
true.
softwood trees, but boy, they sure
A little
do.
more protection, maybe, or something.
Just a
Yeah,
little bit
even
of
if
cover.
it's only a couple of them. Maybe,
That's a
you know?
great
Yeah.
great
It's a
tip,
super
though.
good point.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
I've been busted by deer multiple times in that, shooting down a ridge or something, and then
Going
sure
quick.
enough, there's just 2 little clump of spruce trees and gone.
Gone.
See him for a second, like, oh shit.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, I can think of one that I tracked years ago. I learned a valuable lesson. There was a track come out of an apple orchard up there. It was one of those mornings that the snow was stuck to everything, and
Yeah.
you know, I was kind of half-hearted into it, but good track. I followed it. You know, and he's going along. All of a sudden, he's feeding and stuff, and I wasn't smart enough to look uphill, and all of a sudden the track went just like this, and I looked uphill, and what had happened, I'd walked right by him. He let me walk right by just as pretty as could be, and snuck right out the back door. And I said, boy, did I get a college education right now. You know? But, I mean, this is how you learn.
It is.
You got to fail.
And then the next biggest thing, too, is to, you know, you gotta be looking for the deer and not watching the tracks all the time. I've screwed up on that a few times, too, you know. You look up, and there he goes, and he's been standing there watching you, you know.
Yep. Yep. And the Benoits called that, was it beagling? I think they called it.
Beagling,
You're
yeah.
sitting there, head nose on the track, not looking up enough, and that'll get you in trouble.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, that's some great advice.
Yeah,
We'll kind of wrap it up
awesome.
from there. Thank you for doing this with us, Charlie. We really appreciate it. A lot of good information there that we're going to be able to pull out. So thank you.
Yep, you bet.
thank
My
you.
pleasure. Enjoyed it.
It was awesome.
Hey, thanks for listening. We really appreciate the support. We hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a lot of fun to record. Just a reminder, as I said before, all STAGR gear products are available for pre-order. Go to www.staggergear.com. Get yours picked out today. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.